Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ask JP podcast, where we talk about the issues of the day. Today, we are continuing our ongoing series regarding criminal justice reform. Before you today, we have former Judge Morris Reed. Judge Reed is a former criminal court judge whose legal career has spanned 4 decades. He's a graduate of both the National and Judicial College, Louisiana Judicial College, which offers mandatory training for judges. Judge Reed served as a criminal court and traffic court judge and is a former federal and state prosecutor. Judge Reed headed up the Civil Rights Unit for the U.S. Attorney's Office, Eastern District of Louisiana. He is also a former NOPD officer. Judge Reed was also the first director of the city's Office of Municipal Investigations. Additionally, as a criminal court judge, he created the Judge Morris Reed Junior Judges Program, a program designed to deter youth from criminal activity. That is Judge Reed in a nutshell. Judge Reed?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, JP.
Your head's not in the camera. Oh, there you go.
I'm just getting on. I'm connected on my desktop, but we can go ahead and start with this. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and I admitted you on your desktop too. So there you go. You're on your desktop too.
Let me move this down so you can see me.
Okay.
Which one it is?
You gotta want to mute one of them. There you go.
All right, can you see me?
Not on your laptop yet. You gotta actively turn on the video. There you go. Video's on.
Okay. Getting a little mic feedback.
Yeah. You just gotta turn them. There you go. You're gonna hear my voice twice. You might just want to cut one of them off, unless you're doing sound for one of them.
I just turned the cell phone off.
Okay.
Okay. How much time do we have, Senator?
We can get started real fast. All right. So
take your time. Okay.
First question: why do you want to be district attorney?
Well, I have, if I can quote the immortal B.B. King, I've paid my dues, so I have the right to sing the blues. That's one of his great numbers. I am destroyed over the fact that, we edited and printed a plan for retooling the district attorney's office and changing the culture there with all of the problems that existed in 1996. And it's amazing, JP, I look back at the Reed plan that we offered to the public when I ran against the incumbent, and most of the same problems exist, and the solutions that we outlined in the seven-page plan is applicable today. So why do I want to be DA? I would like to change the culture that exists in the office and make it more applicable to today's community problems. We had a plan to stamp out police corruption, police brutality, apply a plan that would make the district attorney's office appear and look like the diverse community that it's supposed to be serving in terms of racial and gender makeup. We wanted to hire individuals to work, young people to work into the DA's office and be proud of that fact. We wanted to offer training to them and a retention program that would be advantageous to the community as a whole in terms of dealing with crime. As a judge and watching the inexperienced and ill-prepared young people come in to try cases, I had a desire to make some improvement in that regard. I wanted to make an impact on the preventative side of the criminal justice equation also. I plan to institute a community relations division and develop relationships with the community through the clergy, academia, and professional social services, organizations, and nonprofits. So when you have the need for witnesses for domestic abuse cases and juvenile abuse cases, you don't have to coerce victims to come in and interact with the DA's office and the courts. They will be more than enthusiastic to do so because you're not a stranger. So that is one of the programs. One of the other things that I plan to institute a civil rights division to deal with the chronic problem of police abuse and the distance that exists between the police and the community as a whole. We want to improve upon the grand jury process, not as a tool to hide behind when critical issues confront the community, such as police brutality and police murders, but as an investigative tool and one that can look at problems in the community and come up with suggestions and recommendations for change and improvement. The grand jury process, I argue, should be returned back to the criminal court building. That's the people's court. And it is not a tool of the district attorney to be stashed away in the back pocket of the district attorney's office without any type of review or critique. And in terms of stopping the program of multiple billing young males and sending them to Hunts Correctional Institute for minor offenses, we were going to stop that. We will stop treating juveniles as adults. And as we looked at the problem, most of those policies exist only in Orleans Parish, where we have a majority, a minority African American and Hispanic population. So those are some of the things. As a judge, I started a crime prevention program or GED program in the court in the evenings and on the weekends. And I envisioned starting a junior DA's program to deal with crime at the outset, as opposed to waiting and trying to deal with the problems on the back end. We would like to apply some of the diversionary programs and expanded and dealing with adult situations, and also to adapt it for use in the juvenile courts setting also, so we can reduce the number, interrupt and reduce this school to pipeline to prison. My bachelor's degree from Loyola University, a great liberal institution, is in sociology, and my mind is in criminology. So you see, I have an affinity in terms of working with programs dealing with crime prevention and what have you. So those are the reasons that spurred me to enter the race, to push the envelope and cause a dialogue to be held about improving the criminal justice system, and not just to come in as a new DA in this era of Black Lives Matter and talk about sending more people to prison and throwing away lives of young people. Go ahead.
Okay. Let me ask you another question. What is your position on the cash bail system, and how would you change it as district attorney?
Well, as an experienced prosecutor in the federal judicial system, criminal justice system, and also as a public defender on the federal public defender panel, who's done considerable defense work both on the federal and state level, representing battered women, representing Black mothers who've been charged with homicide in our state's courts, and in some instances was able to have them acquitted or have them receive reduced sentence. I think about the crime of the young lady who placed her newborn, which we argue was stillborn baby in Lake Pontchartrain, Morris Jr., and I handled that case, Sierra Craig. And we found in looking at that we need to improve our criminal justice laws in the state. And I'm gonna answer your question that number one, Louisiana doesn't recognize the postpartum depression as a defense for mothers having given birth and going through a depressionary state. It's something that we, a legislative delegation should look at in terms of expanding, because it does exist and has proven medical science. I would, in terms of, and she had to remain in jail for almost 2 years while her case went to trial because she couldn't afford bail. I would adapt the federal system to the state court. I would get rid of the cash bill. I would advocate for getting rid of the cash bill system. Only state legislatures can do that, and substituting a more equitable system for one where we use the electronic monitors, release on recognizance, release to a third party, responsible party, drug testing expanded, mental health counseling and follow up, 10% bonds to be established with individuals who have real estate, who can stand for a party, an arrestee, or individuals who are networked would be compared to the bill to be set. But we just need more humane bail settings. The bail should only be set to protect the risk of a person fleeing from the jurisdiction for trial, and one to would protect the public safety as well. Other than that, it should not be punitive to the person who's awaiting trial, because they are presumed innocent until established as guilty. So I would get rid of the cash bond system because it's only have served as primarily to make money for third parties, and we can really remove that third party and let the individual who's charged with a crime stand before the court and let the court make some logical arrangements to assure the person is going to come back and face the charges. But it shouldn't be punitive.
Okay. What is your position as district attorney on mandatory minimums? Do you intend to seek them frequently? Will there be some criteria? Do you intend on getting rid of them altogether as far as how you apply them?
I think each case should be looked at on a case-by-case basis. Some of the cases I foresee will be diverted from the court system and placed on the district attorney's diversionary program, which we intend to expand, since the community seemed to be moving towards a smaller jail populations, and particularly for minor offenses. It concerns me that I don't see any major prosecution of major drug traffickers in this community, or sex traffickers in our community. I see the victims, individuals who are the low level possession cases, a lot of those, most of those, when you go up to Hunts Correctional Institute, and as a judge, I travel up there many times and to Angola also, and looked at the facility, looked at the programs that they have for individuals who are going to be returning to our community, and a lot of them be returning to jail as recidivists. There are very little vocational training available to them once they go into prison. And so it behooves the community, if these people are coming back out of jail, to try to do something to make them help them to become productive citizens, because they will be eventually living among us. I would expand the programs dealing with, and we took our kids up to Hunts in our junior judge program at Angola, so they could see what they would be confronted with if incarcerated in the state penal institution, and had the prisoners and the warden's administration to talk to them. And the warden said that they saw no other program like it in the state where a judge was that active after our usual 9 to 5 hours in trying to deter individuals from getting involved in crime. But I know it can be done. It's going to take a little extra effort and work. I will require each of my assistant DAs to make that trip up the interstate and visit Hunts Correctional Institute in Angola and see where they're sending these individuals to. I think that would cause them to be more sensitive and visionary in terms of how they handle themselves in court and present themselves, and be less likely to send people to imprisonment for trumped up evidence and hiding evidence and not turning over Brady material at the trial process. So to understand that they are human beings also, merely charged with a crime, and but for certain circumstances, they even one of the assistant DAs could have ended up in the same situation. I know, but for the grace of God, I could have, coming up in the 3rd Ward, the lower 9th Ward, as a 4th of 12 children, and from a working class family and background. But, I had positive role models. I had people who showed me love and care and spent time with me and steered me in the right direction. Positive teachers, committed, dedicated. In New Orleans, we have a perfect storm. You know, educational system was dismantled after Katrina. The lights in most of our parks have been turned off and the grass is too high. You know, JP, I used to walk 12 blocks with my football gear from my house in the 6100 block of North Tonti to Lee Park on Flood and Tonti without, at 12 years old, without anybody bothering me. Kids can't do that now. The parks were open. The coaches were dedicated. And you know, we used to ride the public service bus from Lower Ninth Ward to Landry High School Park across the river to engage in sports activity with people in other communities without a problem. But you know, that instilled in me a value of working in community with other people in terms of team effort. You know, we was taught right from wrong. It was instilled in us the golden rule and how to conduct yourself in the midst of people, strangers you don't know on the bus. You know, it's pathetic that we see so much crime taking place and so much disregard for another human being's person's a life. Just take playing out on Canal Street in the recent shootings and killings downtown. But and that has to be attributed to the fact that folks just not getting good home instructions and there's not no any love. Most of the kids in our program was coming from potential truants from the public school system, latchkey kids who were being influenced by role models on the street that they were in contact. And that's where the gangs activity and influence was having an advantage over our kids. But I sought to interrupt that pipeline of kids being kicked out of school, thrown into the street, into the arms of gangs and gangs influence, and then headed to prison and to the penitentiary, getting involved in illegal activity. So we all have to roll up our sleeves and do some extras if we want this to be a better community for our young people in the future. I have two grandchildren. I'm certainly concerned about the world that they're going to be living in the next 15 to 20 years. Yeah.
Okay. Let me move on a little bit. What is your position on the death penalty as district attorney? Do you intend to seek the death penalty where it's applicable? Will you do things like take into account what the victim's wishes are? I know that with the current district attorney, Mr. Canizero, there have been several instances in which he has pursued the death penalty despite the fact the victim's family did not want the death penalty pursued because they simply didn't believe in it. What's your position on the death penalty as district attorney?
Well, if the victims have right to in the criminal justice process, I believe I would not seek the death penalty if the victim's family advocated against it. Being a Christian person as I am, and having come up in a liberal Judo-Christian environment, I would not. That's not to say I want to enforce the wishes of the jury if they voted for it. As long as the law is on the books, I would carry out the law as dictated by the state statute. However, I will not aggressively seek the death penalty if the families of the victim advocates against it.
Okay. Do you on police reform? What do you believe the district attorney's role is in the continuing evolution of police reform in our community?
Good question. Well, the we know, having been a cop and a chief of the civil rights unit in the U.S. Attorney's Office, only the second African American assistant U.S. attorney in the U.S. Attorney's Office after Dutch Morial, that I had that is of great interest to me. How the police our neighborhoods, because in a lot of neighborhoods, in the majority of neighborhoods, police is considered a friend and a hero. But in some of the poor and working class community, the police image is that of an occupier, occupying a force, and the folks are looked upon them, you know, with a very sinister attitude. As a member of the police department in 1969, it was less than 100 African Americans on the job when I joined. As a matter of fact, everyone in my district, when I first came out the police academy, appeared in the first district, that's in the French Quarter precinct. Every white officer, and I was the only black there at the roll call, refused to ride with me. and I was relegated to having to drive the sergeant because everyone announced at roll call they weren't going to ride with the black guy, the black officer. So that was my awakening to my introduction to the orientation to the police department as a black cop in 1969. But and I set out then to do it differently and make a difference while I wore that uniform, representing the first line of governmental authority that most citizens are encountered. Number one, as chief of the Civil Rights Division, as a former president of the local branch of the NAACP, I want to improve the image of the police department in our community. I wanted to stamp out acts of police abuse and get rid of the rogue cops, bad cops, as I heard Senator Harris say, Kamala Harris said that bad cops are bad for the good cops. But I prosecuted during the Republican administration more bad cops in the Eastern District of Louisiana during the Republican administration than ever had been done in our, or have been done since in the history of the Eastern District of Louisiana U.S. Attorney's Office. When Dutch Morial had a problem with his police department, he had at least 50 attorneys in the city attorney's office, and he had at least 5 private attorneys that made up his staff. He called Morris Reed. He looked around and said, who could rein in the cops? And I took over the office and set up the Office of Municipal Investigation, began to work on improving the image of the cops in this community and getting rid of the bad cops. We reduced considerably the rates and the incidents of police brutality in this community and received national recognition for it. You know, the Dutch was victimized, his family was victimized. They had 2 truckloads of cops did a night ride around, in front of Dutch House on Harrison Avenue, painted racial epithets on his garage doors, yelled the N-word at his family, frightened him so much that he made a formal civil rights complaint to the Justice Department and thought about setting up an office to intervene between the police and for investigating police brutality cases in the police hierarchy. And that's what brought about with community support, the OMI, or the Office of Municipal Investigations. But I would return police officers back to the police department from the DA's office. I would like to transition those officers. They could be used for street enforcement and replace them with civilian investigators. And I will not use police to investigate police in the DA's office in instances of police abuse, police corruption, or police brutality. We're going to have a community relations division. We will have a civil rights division, and I will try to coordinate some interactions at the police academy level, have my assistants go over occasionally and lecture to the officers on constitutional law, the rights of arrestee, the search and seizure rules. I'm against the no-knock warrants unless it deals with situation, whereas as it's a counterterrorism effort. We're getting something like the ultra-right gangs that we see taking place in the state of Michigan right now, and what happened at the Morrow building and during the attack there by right-wing organization. And by the way, the FBI sent out notices far back as 2015 to nonprofit organizations around the country and municipalities that right-wing organizations had infiltrated municipal police departments, particularly where there was large populations of Hispanics and African Americans populations. So we've been put on notice that we've had a problem with cops, bad cops, such as the cop who perpetrated the killing of Floyd there in Missouri. But we're going to have. We're not going to distance ourselves from the police, but we're going to establish a policy that requires and demands that police treat individuals, all citizens, respect regardless of their race, creed, or color.
Okay. Do you consider yourself a reform candidate?
Yeah.
And by that, I want you to kind of both define what you think a reform candidate is and why you think you are a reform candidate or not.
Well, our district attorney's office over the last 3 decades has distinguished itself as being very punitive in nature as it pertains to the lower economic level of society, income bracket of individual citizens in this community. I mean, there's too many cases going to the United States Supreme Court, debt cases where the convictions have been reversed because the court identified unprofessional conduct on the part of prosecutors and police, hiding and fabricating evidence that led to an individual being convicted and placed on death row. I mean, we've had cases where individuals was awaiting execution for 15 and 20 years and then finally exonerated and found to have not committed the crime, and also that the police and the DA's office knew that they hadn't committed the crime and still had them to go to the potentially to the gallows. I will work vigorously to change that culture. Let me see. Police departments generally in the South are born out of slave catchers and vigilante groups. In a lot of instances in the 60s, we found that the Klan and the sheriff in the local communities were synonymous. We knew that Schwerner, Goodman, and Swaney was in the custody of the sheriff and then released to the Klan at midnight when they were killed and assassinated. But that has been the case too often in our history, and we're trying to change that. So what I'm saying is that the police, in a lot of instances, have had that catch them, kill them, confine them attitude when it comes to the minority community. And we have to change that culture. And I think it has been passed on from generation to generation of police officers as they set out to police our community. And I think we're going to see some change, and a reform is certainly needed. Even with the situation where we've had heads of police departments have been minorities or women, they have found it difficult to break that culture and penetrate the curtains, the blue curtains of silence, because the culture is instilled in our institutions. But I foresee a change. I like the fact that Biden, who was instrumental in passing the omnibus crime bill that led to the incarceration of a lot of minor drug offenders on the federal level, has changed his attitude, and they're advocating, he and Senator Harris are retooling the criminal justice system, getting rid of the dismantling to the way it is right now, the prison industrial complex. We should not have citizens making money, investing in the stock market and being able to make money off the confinement of individuals in our federal institutions. And it's like that now because of the private management of a lot of our federal prisons by private security companies, such as Wagon Hut. If you have a retirement fund that has a mutual fund, it's a good possibility that you get the interest or dividends from prison management or some of our federal institutions. And the young people in jail are subject to being placed on the assembly lines, working in Fortune 500 companies at their benefit. I had a young man I represented in a drug case, and he told me he was assembling, got 10 years in federal penitentiary, said he was assembling engines for General Motors while he was incarcerated. They paid him pittance for that. So that reminds you too much of slave labor. That's institutionalized. That's the prison industrial complex. We have the police over-policing certain neighborhoods, individuals being incarcerated for minor offenses. Then when they get to prison, they're not getting any vocational training, but they're put to work for pennies on the dollar to the advantage of corporate America. So I think we have to change that culture.
Okay. Keeping it clean, why are you more qualified than your opponents for this job?
Well, as I said it before, not to overemphasize my age, we're considering a guy for president who's 78 years old when he's sworn in, and Joe Biden. I could serve a term in a DA's office and not be at advanced age as Joe Biden. Um, but on the other hand, my experience as an administrator, working with Dutch Moriel administration, as a prosecutor and as a defense attorney, and as an investigator with the on the federal level, my experience still exceeds the combined experience of my three opponents. If you add up the combined experience of the three individuals who are in this race, my opponents, their experience did not total, I don't believe, my 50 years of experience as a judge, as a defense attorney, as a prosecutor, as an adjunct professor at Tulane University. I think I still top them off. And I would just like to bring some of my experience to bear to retool the district attorney's office and change the culture in our community. Huh? I've done it before as director of OMI, and I know I can make a contribution if I was given the opportunity in the DA's office.
Okay. And what's it been like campaigning during the COVID epidemic? I know you've campaigned before, I've campaigned before, but certainly with social distancing and the way things have changed, campaigning is very different. What's been your experience with that?
Less. It's been detached. Less. You know, less personal, hand-to-hand interaction with the voters. We did a lot of street-level campaigning, and probably plan to do some as we go into the final weeks. But the Zoom conferences and the forums have been quite convenient. I think that we probably are reaching a great deal of people, but you still have to rely upon commercial advertisement. But it's been different, to answer your question. But I've liked the interest that I've seen. I've been contacted by so many groups, individuals who would like to bring the candidates via Zoom to their neighborhoods, to their communities, to their blocks, and I find that invigorating, and I find that I see a stepped up interest and on the part of the community and what's happening in these races. And I think that a lot of it is being, I see a lot of new faces out there. You're accustomed to the Bowles, the Souls, the Cools, the Democratic Executive Committee, and Alliance for Good Government, the traditional ones. But I've seen a lot of new neighborhood groups, a lot of safety groups who are turning their attentions to the presidential race. And a lot of them might be spearheaded by the fact that we got the presidential race at the top of the ballot. My number is 103, so we pretty far down there, and I know there's going to be some drop off from the presidential voting down to where we are. But I think the spillover effect from the presidential elections and the fact that we have such a aberration in the presidential administration has caused a lot of people to look at this race who traditionally may not have turned their attention to us.
Right. I mean, part of these CJR races being so down ballot is why I think we have to have situations like this when we talk about the actual issues, because just as a person in the cheap seats, I've noticed that these judicial races and district attorney's race have not really gotten the attention they need, because when you look at a BLM across the country, it's a critical issue. The Black Lives Matter movement, the momentum it has going, how we're going to change things. But when you look at the coverage of these races, it's anemic. I mean, you're not seeing, if you really want to know what the lasting effect of BLM will be, it will be stuff like the district attorney's race and criminal court races. When you look in the paper, when you look at the local media, there's no coverage of them. It's all the presidential election, which that's very important for as far as the future of our nation. But as far as the future of our community, these races like the one you're currently in, they are the most important races. If you want to see real change on how Black and brown people are treated in the criminal justice system, this is your 1 in 6 year opportunity to weigh in on it. And people don't realize that. You get to vote for DA now. You don't vote on the DA again for 6 years. So if you don't weigh in now, a whole half a generation will have passed. But our time is almost up. Is there anything you'd like to add for voters before you go?
Yes. quickly, as president of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which was started by the Jewish community, believe it or not, and financed by the Jewish community. When the 1908, when the NAACP was started, it was started to combat lynchings of African Americans primarily in this country. And the only two Black members at the time was Dr. W.B. Du Bois, the first PhD recipient from Harvard University, and I think I.W. Wells. But I marched during the summer in 2015 with the national president from Birmingham to MLK Monument in DC. And next to us in that march was a rabbi carrying a Torah all the way from Birmingham and interchanged with other rabbis pitching in to Washington, D.C. And to be next to individuals, white, Black, Hispanic, Jewish, Christian, working on reforming, and they were advocating changing the educational system in our communities. They were protesting against the prison industrial complex, protesting against individuals' inadequate health care. Those things that the NAACP put in their resolutions at their national convention that year are some of the same things that we are advocating to become change in terms of impacting our community here. Stop multiple billing individuals, sending them to prison for a lifetime of terms of imprisonment for stealing T-shirts out of Winn-Dixie. Stop treating juveniles as adults. All of these things have been advocated for by the NAACP and NAACP Legal Defense Funds going back to 2015. And it hit street level with the Black Lives Matter movement. But those are the things that I will continue to work for. And if not elected, I will offer my services and help and assistance to whoever the DA is in that office, and hope that they be open-minded and towards working to change our office for the betterment of the whole community and changing the culture in the district attorney's office and in the criminal justice system. And you're fading out. Did I cut you off? Can you hear me? JP, you're fading out.
I didn't hear. Sorry, I got it.
Okay.
So in closing, is there any Facebook or Twitter or anything else that you want to put out there so people can look you up?
Yeah, Morris Reed, 4DA.com is our website. My Facebook is Morris W. Reed. We're going to post our little 6-page plan, the Reed plan for reforming the district attorney's office. And it's short, it's going to be brief. And my number is number 103. And I hope folks will consider me.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it, Judge. You've been a great guest.
Thank you very much, JP. You're a great senator. Appreciate it.
Have a great day.